So when you are taking a spoonful or eating it, there's still a bite to your vegetables. Okay, I do not like mushy vegetables, so I tend to keep my vegetables a little larger and cut when I cook. Minced garlic here, this is probably equivalent to 3. If you like more garlic, go ahead and add more. You're just going to go ahead and mince it really fine, okay? When you do mince garlic really fine, friends, just be mindful, once it hits your pan, it's gonna tend to, brown or burn a little faster. So if you want to add your garlic really at like one of the first ingredients to your hot pan, I would go ahead and move very quickly. Or if you're nervous about burning your garlic and you do have it cut at a minced size, I would go ahead and add it in maybe the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th ingredient to the pan. And I can show you later what I mean by that. We also have a can of garbanzo beans that it's always good to keep in your pantry. You can make stews, curries, hummus, veggie patties, burgers, whatever with these beautiful chickpeas, okay? Like I said, I had tomato sauce. It's already pureed up, which is okay. It just will add a little more texture to it. It'll be a little more fine when we eat it, okay? A little crushed red pepper. Heat adds a dynamic, a little more flavor to your dishes. It actually marries all the flavors together. Heat, acid, salt are very important component, and fat are very components to each dish. So crushed red pepper, you always want to add some kind of heat. Hot sauce, actual chili peppers, dried chilies, whatever, cayenne pepper. Traditionally, this recipe, people do use cayenne pepper. I found cayenne because it's a powdered form. It's so fine that you can't really judge how much you use. Like if you put a little dash or like a half a teaspoon, you think, oh, that's not a lot, but sometimes it can overpower and have too much heat to your dishes. So I like to use crushed red pepper, actually whole dried peppers. Okay, so just be mindful of that. I have this from Corte. We were all given a gift, and this was part of our gift, and this is like really fancy Spanish smoked paprika. So we're gonna bust that out today for the shakshuka. And what I have here is dried thyme and oregano. Okay, awesome. And with the shakshuka, what it basically is, it's a tomato-based stew, like I said, but what traditionally happens is we crack in like raw eggs into the stew, and you pop it into the oven, and you just allow it to set up a little, just the whites to solidify just a little. But you want that yolk, if you are a big fan of yolk eggs, you want the yolk to kind of like coat the stew, and it actually will thicken up, and it adds a different texture to the stew. It actually allows it to thicken up a little. So I'm going to show you how to crack it in the stew. And we're going to top it off with some feta cheese, because that's what we have. You could use any cheese you want. Today we have feta, and that's what we're going to do. Okay. Typically, shakshukas, you could have over polenta, over grits, couscous, rice, quinoa, whatever grain you want. I tend to like it with some crusty bread. So I don't have any crusty bread today, but I found a frozen bagel in the freezer that I'm gonna toast and just show you a little trick on how to turn any kind of like bread into some fancy element to a one-pot dish. All right, homies, let's go over here. I have this preheated. We're gonna work with a cast iron skillet today, okay? Like I said, it's a one pot. All the magic is gonna happen right in here, and yeah, that's about it. So I'm gonna just turn the heat up just a touch. I have it going already, so it's good and ready to go. I'm gonna add some oil. Canola oil, that's my go-to always for those that have been to all 3 virtual cooking classes. I tend to stick with canola. It has a high smoking point, so that's what I like to use. First thing, I'm gonna go in with the onions, okay? Just gonna move it around, friends. Just let the onions caramelize. I cut them really thin, as you can see. Add just a touch more oil. There we go. We're not looking to caramelize these, friends. We're just looking to just get them a little softer, translucent in color. And you'll start at this point. It's probably only been about 30 to 45 seconds, and you actually really already smell the onions cooking, and it smells really, really great. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and add the mushrooms at this point. Probably don't need all of them. This is probably about 5 mini mushrooms. It's up to you, you know, what utensil you want to use with a cast iron. I'm just going to use this big old spoon that I have just to mix it around because I like it. It's probably one of my favorite spoons to have in the kitchen. Some people like to use, you know, a wooden spoon, especially if you're making a roux in a cast iron skillet. Some like to use tongs. I wouldn't use a rubber spatula because it'll like disintegrate into the cast iron skillet. Okay. I'm gonna add the garlic now. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of move everything around so the garlic can hit right into the cast iron heat. It smells so good, y'all. So I did some research on what shakshuka is, and like I said, it's a tomato-based stew. Known in the Mediterranean, you know, I guess in the Mediterranean, you know, like there's so many like tomato trees, and trees grow rapidly there. So I'm sure that's, you know, tomato sauces, and, you know, instead of having pasta every day, they're probably like, you know, how can we turn tomatoes into another dish and feed the whole family? And that's how shakshuka came about. I also learned that there is a version of shakshuka in Chinese cooking, which I didn't know, but after reading about it, I was like, interesting, that makes sense, because there was a dish that my grandma used to make that was a tomato based, and it was stupid. It was really, really sweet. And she would add, you know, garlic, onions, green bell pepper specifically, and sliced flank steak in at the very last second, and we would just have it over rice. And I thought it was very interesting, but it was I remember thinking back now that it was actually really sweet, so I'm sure she added, you know, some kind of sugar to it. But when I was doing some research on what shakshuka is, I learned that it's pretty common in Chinese cooking, which I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. All right, y'all, you can see that I've got some good color on the onions. That's what we're, you know, that's good. Add some flavor, some caramelization. I'm going to go ahead and add the red bell peppers and the green beans at the same time. You know, you find that your spoon, your spatula game is not as strong, and everything's like, you know, cooking at a little faster. Just give your pan a little shake, and it'll loosen all the goodness and the bits from the bottom. Okay, you don't have to lift it up because cast irons are pretty heavy. Just go ahead and give it a little shake. At this point, I'm gonna add a little salt. Our dried thyme and oregano. Three dashes of crushed red pepper friends, and some paprika. I would say this is probably, I'm adding about a teaspoon of paprika. Smells good. Zoe says so too. My dog, just chilling. All right, y'all. Getting that going. We add the chickpeas at this point. As you see, it goes fast, so it's always good to have your mise en place ready, which mise en place basically translates to everything in its place. So if you ever hear, you know, cooking shows and chefs and people want to say fancy French words, mise en place is one of those phrases, and all it really translates to is to have everything in its place. All right, so since the chickpeas are already cooked. I'm not too worried about, cooking this down a little more. All the vegetables look good, nice and shiny. They're all marrying together. Okay, gonna add the tomato sauce right now. Turn this down just a touch. Okay, and all you want to do now is go ahead and incorporate everything. Okay. You want your sauce to be fairly thick. You don't want it to be loose and, for it to like bleed all over your plate. You kind of want it to be stew-like, think of maybe not as thick as a chili, maybe like a marinara, like something as that consistency. That's what you're looking for, okay? So at this point, I'm just letting it come up to a little boil. As you can see, let it talk to each other. Okay, because you want the liquid to be nice and hot when you drop your eggs in. So it's kind of helping cooking the eggs while it's on the stove top. So you're not relying on the oven to do all your cooking of the egg, okay? So right now, I'm gonna crack the eggs in, friends, okay? I'm gonna just turn this down. And what you wanna do when you're cracking your eggs, you're gonna wanna make a little pocket of where you wanna place your eggs. So I want the first one to go there. People say crack your egg on the side of a bowl or something. I always find it easier to crack an egg on a flat surface. All right, I'm gonna use 3 eggs today. I'm gonna go ahead and drop one in right here. Boom. Tell him, Zoe, tell him. Third one's going right here, all right? Great. So I'm just going to let it boil. You see how the solids are kind of coming up a little here? That's perfect. That's what we're looking for, okay? It's starting to cook right here. All right, I'm going to turn the stove top off. I'm going to pop these into the oven. In the meantime, I'm going to step over, start toasting the bagel, and take questions. Any questions? I know someone has a question. No? No questions? Okay, let me think.
Well,
I'm trying to
I have a question. No one's typed one. Oh wait, here's one. What temp is your oven? That's what I was going to ask. Are you cooking on like a medium heat, or what are you cooking?
It's at 400. So reason why I keep it at 400 is because I just want to go ahead and make sure that eggs are cooked, and I want this to be, somewhat quicker. So I have it actually on my convection setting, so the fan is going as well at 400 degrees. What about on top? Oh, and on the stove top, it was at a medium high. So you're correct, Allison, medium. And you could always adjust your temperature too.
I have another.
If you have, yeah, go for it.
Now, you talked a little bit about this before, but for anyone who's just joining us this week, you talked about the importance of salt and the difference between the fine salt and the more thicker, the granular salt.
Yeah, great question. So there are many kinds of salt you have out there. Most of us grew up with very fine salt on the table or at grandma's house, or what our parents or yourself cook was very, very fine. It's almost like granulated sugar. I always say, actually we have a jar in our pantry it's probably like rock solid right now. I think we purchased it years ago, and I think I only bought it just for popcorn, to be quite honest with you. But it's always best to go with the coarse salt. It's not as salty, and you can actually see when you're actually salting your food, you can actually see the salt itty bitty rocks in your food, so you kind of can tell how much you have in there. You use iodized salt, which is pretty much powder. Once you add it into your food, you're not gonna be able to see it because it disintegrates. You're like, oh, it needs more salt, needs more salt, needs more salt. And then before you know it, you've overpowered your whole dish. It's always good to taste as you go. And I didn't today. I'm just trusting the amount of salt, of pinch that I use. But it's always really good to, you know, taste as you go. Just so you know if it needs anything else. Let me check the eggs. They're looking good. All right, bagels, sorry. Any more questions?
I have a question. I'm thinking about doing a vegan May, or maybe a somewhat vegan May, but I really like eggs. So I'm just curious if you have any recommendations for, is there a way to make this vegan, or does it really rely on like the runny egg? Like,
I mean,
could I put in
it
a
would be
tofu?
delicious.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
Keep
go
going.
ahead. No, sorry, go
ahead. I will stop. I'm gonna go on mute.
I'm laughing because Danielle has told me, she's like, when it comes to Zoom, you have to give a 10-second pause because, so I'm laughing because, yeah, we have this conversation. Sorry. It doesn't, I mean, you could do, it could totally be vegan. You don't need the eggs. The eggs adds a nice element to it, a different flavor. I'm trying to think what you can use aside from eggs to keep it vegan. I mean,
It's
you
also
could probably
totally
try
okay.
to add like.
I'm just curious if it relied on the consistency of like the egg.
I mean, no, it's not going to change the whole dish. You know, it's just going to have without egg. It's not going to. But I just pop in my head. You could actually try to use cashew butter, and it'll probably add a little silky thickness, creaminess to it that sometimes a yolk can actually do in a dish.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see how this vegan May goes if I even try it. I may do it in May, or I may try it for 4 days and go back to my eggs.
Send me a picture. All right, eggs are looking good. I'm going to just step over and get this bagel here, okay? So, trick, fancy bagels from Bunco Bagels here in Asheville. Yay. All right, so when you have some bread, this works well when you have like really crusty Italian ciabatta. What did I say? Did I say baguette already? If you have any kind of like crusty bread, this works well. However, if you don't, because we can't go to the grocery store and you're stuck at home and you know you have any kind of like bread in your freezer you've been saving, this is what you can do. So I just took the bagel, I toasted it, as you can see, okay? And I'm going to take our garlic clove, just any clove, and you're just going to rub it on your bread. So as you can see, I'm actually rubbing off a good bit of the garlic, okay? And you could actually really smell it. So go ahead and rub it into the bread. Okay, so I mean, a good bit has come off. I'm gonna do the bottom side. And this is just gonna act like a very fancy garlic bread, but we're using, you know, really old bagels or old bread that we have in the freezer, just to go accommodate an addition to this, you know, shakshuka that we're about to have, because you didn't want to have any grains, you didn't want it to be too heavy to bust out some you know, couscous or polenta or grits or whatever. You just want to keep it simple with something to dip into your tomato base, and that's what we have. So it smells great, y'all. And I used pretty much about half of the garlic. You could go a little heavier. I mean, I could keep going. And when you bite into this, you're going to taste like garlic bread. I'm just going to finish it off with some olive oil. Okay. And you could also take this trick, you know, and do it with any bread. You could have your balsamic vinegar, your olive oil mixture on the counter and dip it in. I'd like to do this for like hummus, or do this and like make cheesy bread, like just like old school childhood cheesy bread. You pop in the oven or your toaster oven, you toast your bread, you put your cheese on, whatever. After you toast your bread, rub some garlic on it, put some cheese on it, you're good to go. It's like adult cheesy bread, okay? All right, friends, look at that. That's what we're looking for, okay? So as you can see, it's bubbling. So the only way I know how I feel like it's ready is because the whites are becoming solidified, so they're solid. But I know just by looking at it, they're still raw. But once you scoop some out for yourself, that heat in the sauce is gonna cook it a little further. So I know people are a little afraid of, let's bring it over here, D. A little afraid about eating, raw eggs. That's totally fine because the heat of the sauce, you can see, is really bubbling. It's gonna go ahead and cook it. So I'm gonna just crack one open so y'all can see. See that? And that sauce in there, it's already like cooking it up already, okay? So imagine all this goodness in your bowl, and then you take the piece of this and you dip in here and you eat. It's gonna be delicious. That's all we got. That only took 30 minutes, friends. What do y'all think?
So
any questions? You can substitute anything. Like I said, this is basically anything you have in your pantry, in your fridge, anything that's going bad. I literally took a few things that were starting to, go a little too far in the fridge, and I just added it. You could add zucchini, eggplant, cauliflower, anything you want. Carrots. I wouldn't do like celery. I would put asparagus in there. It's delicious. And if you want to add like, any kind of animal protein as far as like meat, you can do.
Were you going to add that cheese?
Oh yeah, thank you. Most important part. Look, and you don't even have to melt the feta. But if you were to pick a cheese and you want it to be melty, I would add it on about. You crack the eggs, you put it in the oven, and I would wait about 3-4 minutes, add your cheese, and then pop it back in the oven if you want it to be melty, okay? You can also top it off with parsley, which I have over here. And I'm gonna demo and show y'all how to cut parsley. I just find that a lot of people ask me, whenever I'm like at their house and we're cooking and they're like, Jay, like, how do you cook parsley properly? Or if I see people cut parsley, I kind of like stop and I'm like, hey, let me just give you some hints here and there. I see some people will take their parsley, pile it up, and just take their knives and just go through it. Okay. Show you where you can basically just run your knife through it one time without bruising your parsley, okay? Bruising your parsley or any kind of herb, basil, I see it more in basil more than anything, is when your herbs are bruised, they start becoming really, really dark and losing its moisture. That is called bruising. That can happen for two reasons. One, your knife is really dull, or you're just putting too much pressure onto the herb and you're crushing it, you're losing its integrity, okay? So I just took some parsley, took it off the stem. I like a little stem left anyways. The larger stalks of stem, you could turn that into a chimichurri. You can add it to your pesto. You can add it to your stocks, or you can add it to your smoothies. I always save the stems and I use it for something else, okay? Because I don't like wasting food. So what I do, I crumple it. I like make it into a ball, y'all. Okay, like that. And I'm like rocking my knife back and forth like a boat, okay? And I'm letting the knife do all the work. With the hand that's holding the parsley, I am making sure that my it's called a claw, that my fingers are like this. That when my fingers are like this in a claw form, y'all, that the knife is hitting my knuckle, and that's how I know I'm not gonna cut my finger, okay? If you lay your hand flat like this, you're gonna cut yourself. Or if your finger is kind of on a slant like that, you're still gonna cut. So you wanna make a hard claw, and you wanna use the back of your knuckle for your knife to guide it, okay? So let's go back to this, crumple it up. Just gonna run the knife through it. Okay, I don't go any further than this for my parsley. Sometimes you want it minced. If it causes for mince, you can go ahead. This is the most knife work I put on on parsley. Okay, I'm gonna take this, y'all. We're gonna garnish.
That's amazing, Jay. I think you should do just a whole show on cutting.
Okay. What would you like to learn as far as cutting? Do you see a lot of cuts in recipes that you're not familiar with, or you just don't understand? What would you like to see?
Well, I know me personally, it's just nice to see someone who knows how to cut, to do it the proper way, like the technique you just showed us, but also like the proper sizes of how to cut certain things, such as onions or any other vegetables, because cutting those can affect the way it tastes. So I think it would just be neat to see a professional do it.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I could totally do that. That makes sense too, because it depends on what you're making as well. Like I kind of explained in the beginning, you know, I like my vegetables to have bite. I don't like it to be overcooked. So I keep my you know, vegetables cut at a larger bite size. I can totally do that, because it depends on what you're making. Like if you're making a stew and it's going for 5 hours on the stovetop, you want your vegetables cuts to be a bit larger so they don't disintegrate, you know, so quickly. But if you're making like tacos or something and you're adding them to your ground turkey and such, you want them to go really fast, so you want them to be smaller. So yeah, I could totally do a class on knife cuts. That actually a lot of people have asked that, so I will totally come through with that one.
This is probably a way less cool question, but the question about knife cuts made me think of it. So pretty much everything we cook in our house has onions in it. And I tend to be sort of like prep cook for everything. And
That's good.
cry my eyes out every time we cook, because onions, I don't know what it is. Maybe you can answer this if I'm just particularly sensitive. I've tried all kinds of different things, from like putting a matchstick in my mouth to running water next to the bowl or the cutting board. I'm just wondering, like, is there a way of cutting? Is there a type of onion? Or is there like an incantation that you know of that can like save my eyeballs when I'm cutting onions?
So that's great. I still cry cutting onions. Like I was cutting green onions this morning because I was prepping some dumplings and I was crying. I literally cry all the time regardless of the onions. So most times, I mean, I don't cry all the time, but there are tears. So there's a few things that can happen. Is most times the onion itself can be old. So if it's old and it just oxidizes and it releases all this, I don't know what it's called, but it makes us cry. Whatever are in onions, I don't know the scientific name, it actually causes us to cry. So one, the onions themselves can be old. Two, your knife at home can be dull. So if your knife is dull and it's hitting the onion, that's actually bruising it as opposed to going through, that can cause people to tear up. The only trick that I can recommend is maybe placing your onions in the refrigerator. Have them a little cold before you try dicing them and see if that works. You know, I would keep the onions in the refrigerator, like from the store, go into your refrigerator, because onions belong outside. But maybe if you know you're cooking, maybe an hour before you're getting ready to cook, I would pop them in the oven. The refrigerator, and see if it gets just a touch colder, and see if that helps. If not, put a whole book of matches in your mouth.
Jay, also people like to know what kind of brand of equipment you're using. And we noticed the cast iron skillet. Also, what about knife brands do you recommend?
Knife brands? So this knife right here, it's a Japanese knife. It's called a Miyabi. I tend to stick with Japanese knives. Reason being, it's one whole piece. Okay, so this is one whole steel. The handle to the blade, how it's made, they take a piece of steel and they chisel it down to the handle to the blade. Okay, I typically don't like knives that are two pieces. this one here is kind of 2 pieces. This was the very first knife that I ever bought. Actually, Danielle bought this for me like 14 years ago and it's still living. You can see that it's 2 pieces. It still stays because it's a German knife, and German knives are really good, but you can see the black is actually like a part of the handle that is melted or, you know, molded together. So the blade and this silver part right here, that's 1 piece, and they added on like this black. It kind of looks like some kind of wood. Okay. Like I said, I just prefer ones that are 1 full steel, because sometimes you'll go and buy a knife that are like 2 pieces or 3 pieces and the handle's wood, and then over time the wood will start to like lose its material, you know, having it washed and everything, and I just don't feel that the handle is secure, and you want to feel safe when you're using your knife. Okay. I would suggest spending a little more money on your knife. I know sometimes you're like, no, you know, some knives can be like anywhere from like $80 to $300. You're like, I don't want to spend that much money on a knife. I would suggest you spending at least $80 to $100 on one knife that you really like. I wouldn't just go on the internet. I would go to the internet to shop and see what you like by the look of it. But then I would suggest you go to Kitchen & Company, Sur La Table, or Crate Barrel. I think those are the 3 that actually have knives in store you could purchase. And they allow you to take a knife and cut actually and use it to make sure it feels good, because it has to feel good in your hand. Okay. I wouldn't just go pick a knife because it looks good and it is $35. You know, you actually have to, it's like a tool, right? And, you know, us people that cook for a living, you know, we spend a good bit of money on knives because it's literally, we use it every day. It's part of our tool. Okay. So I would go to those 3 stores and pick a knife you like and use it and see how it feels in your hand. If the handle feels too heavy, you know, and you're doing a lot of cooking, let's say the handle's too heavy, you buy it. And let's say you're cooking, you know, Thanksgiving, Christmas meal, and it's 3 hours you're prepping, okay? And family's coming over. You will see by the 3rd hour, friends, that your hand and your forearm is gonna be sore. So you wanna prevent that. And that is because probably the knife is too big or too heavy for your hand, okay? Now, you don't have to have all of these different knives. They're all for different things. I like to collect knives, but I would just suggest getting a really good chef's knife. And that's pretty much what they're called, a chef's knife. It's an everyday knife. And then I would go ahead and get a smaller one. These are called paring knives. And these are just for, you know, smaller cuts. You core your apple, cut fruit with it, peel garlic or grapes, or I don't know what else we peel, oranges. That's what you would want to use for a paring knife. Okay, so if you want to invest, I would go ahead and spend a little money on a knife, get a chef's knife, and then a paring knife. Okay, it's also good to have a really good serrated knife as well, but serrated knives are really, really dangerous. The most accidents and worst cuts I've ever really seen are coming from serrated knives because they have that jagged edge, and people don't do the claw, so you can only imagine the damage that this knife does. It's horrible. Any questions? Oh yeah, cleaning your knife. So I would just go ahead and use hot soapy water. Don't put it in your dishwasher. Just go ahead and get your sponge or towel, put some soap, hot soapy water, scrub it, wipe it off, and then dry it before you put it away. Because if you don't dry it, it'll rust your blade. Awesome. I appreciate everyone for joining.
Thank you, Jay.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you,
So
Jane.
have a great weekend.
Thank you everyone for joining, and don't forget, we'll be hosting more of these in the upcoming week.